So we were talking about, the different ways human beings are not primates, and we were on human beings are, of course, capable of speech, whereas primates are not. This is a huge difference in our makeup and in our overall capabilities. The human throat is completely redesigned with much greater levels of complexity, and being able to make the fine-tuned small mouth noises that basically are the building blocks of speech. Whereas the throat of a primate simply does not have that kind of design, and it doesn't have those fine-tuned capabilities. So that is something that would clearly be a progression in the human being as compared to the primate. And again, I would suggest that that is due to the way that we were engineered, because they needed us to be able to communicate not only with them but with each other. So when they did the genetic manipulation that they did, things like perfectly balanced locomotion may not have been a huge issue, but being able to take direction and be able to communicate with each other to coordinate the direction that they were being given would have been placed very high on the priority list. Okay, so this certainly fits in with a adaptation or an advantage that would have been programmed into us, and therefore supports the interference theory hypothesis. There is no sign in human beings of the typical estrus cycles that are found in primates and many other animals. The estrus cycle is essentially what we commonly know as being in heat, a heat cycle. Okay, so a time period of elevated sexual energy. Okay, so human beings generally do not have anything like that. Certainly not anything to the extent that exists in primates, where they're in heat for a time during often the menstrual cycle in females, and then it subsides after that passes. So the concept of the heat cycle is not found in human beings. And absolutely, these last 2 points are so critical. Okay, this to me really proves is the scientific evidence when people decide to take this entire body of research seriously and start to look into it for themselves in a way that is, casting off to the side the typical derision and ridicule that this field of research has been associated with, and start looking at this from a mature perspective. These are the points that are really going to show us where we came from and why we're in the situation that we're in as an entire species, socially and spiritually. And the human genome has within it over 4,000 genetic disorders. That's not the case for any other animal living on this planet. We have more genetic defects in our DNA than any other creature living on the earth. Now, why would that be? Why would it be that just somehow the so-called most advanced creature living on the planet, somehow we were built with more genetic defects than any other animal on the planet? Kind of strange and anomalous, don't you think? I mean, why would the creator of the universe, if he was our creator, make us with so many built-in flaws? Oh, is it because we have to be reminded that we're not perfect, like quote-unquote he is? In this patriarchal view of God that so many major world religions have? Oh, just like the Old Testament God, which we're going to get into, that whole concept of the Old Testament God, okay? Somehow he had to constantly remind us that you're inferior to me, right? Now, it wouldn't have anything to do with the type of genetic hybridization and splicing and dumbing down and disconnection that was done with our genome to create these things, all of these disorders. Couldn't have anything to do with that from another intelligent species that completely came in and did a number on humanity. That doesn't make any sense, but it makes sense that the God of creation would have nothing better to do than give us an inferior genome. He's given us something to work out of, right? You know, that's the challenge. We'll start you completely screwed up and see if you could, you know, turn yourself into something that works properly over time, right? You know, we'll give you a chance to work on yourself, to perfect yourself. I mean, you know, the whole creationist idea, again, it's just as childish as the scientists that don't want to look at evidence for what really happened on this planet because of the implications. And once again, it's all because of fear. I can't overstress this enough. All the religious people, all the so-called scientific, but it's scientismic people, okay? I don't know if that's a word, but if it's not, I just coined it, okay? The people who are worshipers at the altar of scientism, just like people who are the worshipers at the altar of cultural religions of any type, no matter where they're located geographically or, you know, what God they, you know, believe in. It's a child's mentality. It is a childlike mentality that doesn't want to look at the hard questions. Okay? What put 4,000 plus genetic defects in the human genome? Try to wrestle with that question and its implications. So does nature just do that? Oh, these are just random mutations. That's what? That's natural selection? That's how natural selection works? I thought natural selection selected the best from what was inferior. You know, but somehow it created 4,000 genetic disorders in our genome. You know, I mean, that's what Darwinists would have you believe. And creationists would have you believe God did this. For what purpose? To torment us? Or, you know, or just to remind you we're not as good as He is. It's always a male God, you know? It's never a force. It's never some entity that is neuter or has no sex. It's always male, you know, in all the major cultural religions.
Something that has got me puzzled, however, in the question that I want to ask.
Sure.
We're talking about the difference between humans and primates and the chromosomes and all this, but we're also talking about 85% of the population of the world has got the Rh factor in their blood.
Right.
Which is a rhesus chromosome.
Right.
If I'm correct. There are 15% of the entire population on the planet that don't have that.
Correct.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, my take on the whole Rh factor, positive or negative, you know, whether we have the rhesus factor in our genome, is that I think if it's present, we probably have more of the genetics that were present in the original human beings, or, you know, the original beings, regardless of what you want to call them, that were naturally evolving on this planet. I think that is the hominid aspect to us. But then, you know, that factor, I think, being removed in a small percent of the population is part of the non-human essence. Now, I'm not trying to say that people that have Rh negative blood are non-human. I'm saying that this other presence that came here and interbred with us didn't have that in their blood. And what happened was, over time, you know, they introduced their genetics into our bloodlines, and some of that, those what you might call a recessive trait, the absence of that trait, you know, propagated in certain bloodlines. And that's why most bloodlines that are of quote unquote royal origin, or, you know, blue blood, or, you know, you could say the ruling bloodlines, okay, largely have this Rh negative aspect. You know, people have made a lot about this, have, you know, talked about this quite extensively. I tend to not think that just this one factor is the most important thing to look at when it comes to this, but it does play into it a little bit, and so I'm glad that you basically brought it up and mentioned it. I think it's essentially a sign of the Rh positive aspect, I feel, means that we have a little bit more of a connection to the original lineage of what was developing on this planet than an infusion of what you might call Nephilim DNA or Anunnaki DNA, or just simply whatever you want to call them, regardless of the culture that talked about them and gave them a name, of the non-human entities that came here in the ancient past. So,
may I interrupt
Sure.
for a moment? I have known for a long time that I'm Rh negative, and I'm certainly not royal.
Right. No, absolutely not. So
but
what I'm saying is that these bloodlines interbred with all of humanity. It's like they didn't just purely keep their blood constantly in their lineage. Obviously, it leaked over into the rest of the population, and now, like you said, probably over 15% of humanity has that factor within their blood. So it's not something that has anything to do with the level of consciousness that a person is going to be at or can reach. We have integrated it into our whole genetic pool, so to speak.
What little bit of research I've been able to find on this as I was looking it up is there's a whole bunch of people with the Rh negative that seem to have a lot of interactions with an alien presence.
Yes.
Or something that's beyond us.
Yes.
I've had all kinds of experiences that if I sat and told somebody, they wouldn't believe them.
Oh, you're absolutely right there. When it comes to that, there is a absolute correlation and connection between the interaction of people, of human beings with non-human entities, and the Rh negative factor in human blood. Without any doubt in my mind, there is an absolute correlation there, because the percentages of people that have had abduction-related experiences, or even very strange encounters of some type with non-human entities, and the percent of them that have the Rh negative factor is just, compared to how much of the whole percentage of the human population have it, is absolutely off the charts. So there's certainly a correlation there, and I'm glad you mentioned that as well, Lynn.
I would like to know if there's more information on that aspect of it that I can look up then.